You're Roger.
We
Thanks,
are
Roger.
now live. Hello, audience. Hello, Alpha Geek Radio. And we are about ready to go. You looking good, John?
Yeah.
Now
I got
before...
my Linux Foundation swag
Oh,
on,
yeah, I
so
love
I'm
it.
happy.
Very good. And I have down to introduce you as Blockchain Offerings Director. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, great.
Product man. I mean, I'm a product guy. We call it offerings around here.
What would you like me to say then? I'll say whatever you need.
Offerings director is fine.
Perfect. Okie doke. Well, then let's get going. You all ready, Scott?
I'm all set.
All right. Here we go.
The Daily Tech News Show is brought to you by its global listener base, not outside organizations. To find out how you can contribute, go to dailytechnewsshow.com/support.
This is the Daily Tech News for Wednesday, February 22nd, 2017. I'm Tom Merritt, Scott Johnson alongside, as he is most Wednesdays. Good day, Scott.
Good day, Tom. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me once again.
Absolutely. Good to have you alongside, and very excited that John Wolpert, Blockchain Offerings Director at IBM, is able to join us today to help us understand a little more about what the blockchain is good for. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, guys.
So where are you at? It's a beautiful location you're in.
Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a San Francisco guy, but I moved here. A good chunk of our engineering team and Jerry Cuomo, the grand poobah of blockchain at IBM, is here, and it's hard to make an insanely great product when you're 3,000 miles away from your team. So I moved.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's treating you well from this aspect. So, we are going to flip our normal order of events, which we do every so often. We'll get to the top stories here in just a minute, but let's start with our discussion story today. Now, back in December, on December 7th, we did an episode explaining what the blockchain is. So if you want, you can go back and check that out. We even clipped out the blockchain explainer, kind of just giving you the basics. But the idea is that it's a public ledger. It's verifiable. It's difficult to forge. According to a Finacle Let's Talk Payments survey, 69% of banks are experimenting with permissioned blockchains. So this just isn't for cryptocurrency. It's also for other areas of finance. Blockchain rollouts would prioritize business areas where it can improve transparency. Use cases include cross-border payments, digital identity management, clearing and settlement, letter of credit processes. And these are not talking about Bitcoin. These are talking about normal fiat currencies that we deal with today. It could also be used for energy. The Energy Web Foundation is a global nonprofit organization focusing on accelerating blockchain in the energy sector, so dealing with the distribution of energy. IBM is working with Dubai on blockchain tracking goods and processing transactions. Dubai is one of the largest re-export centers for goods flowing between Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. So forget about blockchain's Bitcoin connection for the moment. Let's talk about it simply on its own. And John, I'm curious, when you need to explain blockchain to people, how do you explain it?
Well, I'm gonna really bake your onion here. I don't talk about blockchain much anymore. I talk about the transaction fabric of the internet and how we're about to see the advent of that. So I remember in 1992, I'm sitting around trying to write a 500 location application that needed to, and I had to write all the, my team and I had to write all the communication protocols between these different servers in these different locations, and it was a pain in the butt. It took us a year. And then 1994, it was just the internet, and it was easy, and it would have taken us a week, for that part of what we were doing. We're about to see the same thing again with the transaction web, or the internet, the transaction fabric of the internet.
So when you say transaction fabric, what does that mean?
Specifically, it means that we needed, and we're about to have a fabric layer, like the internet, where we can have a standard way of sharing assets, and the rules by which we move those assets around, digital assets of some kind or representations of physical assets, in a way where none of us has to be the central body or the central authority through which we're all doing business, right? And that's where blockchain are useful in that structure, but it's not just about blockchain. It's really about distributed ledger technology and having the ability to do those distributed functions in a common way.
I think the thing that hangs people up, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I know you're always trying to wrap your head around this too, is that sounds great. A way that I can just publicly verify that this box got to this place or this amount of dollars got put in that account without anybody being able to change that record, and it's verifiable by everybody. But how is that possible? How is someone not going to get into that and change it? Because we hear about so many security vulnerabilities and things like that.
That's right. And so, and of course, if somebody gets your private keys, they can impersonate you. That's an issue, right? So we have a lot to do. This isn't just about, blockchain isn't a panacea. It does do a good job of saying, the thing I committed to this ledger didn't get changed. I didn't change it. You didn't change it. So I agree to give you 5 cookies if you give me 4 donuts. But if you give me 4 donuts within 15 days, I'll give you 6 cookies. And if LIBOR didn't go over 5%, I'll give you 7 cookies.
Man, LIBOR on donuts particularly, it's awful.
Yeah. So you could lie, as we know, you could lie about LIBOR, and so you want to make sure that and this is where cognitive technology and lots of parallel processing and lots of verification of data sources really matters, right? Because you want to know that if you put a lie on a blockchain, you've just got a permanent lie. Right. So that's something we all have to worry about. But once it's there, you've got provenance. You've got the assurance that this agreement that you and I made for the cookies and donuts, I didn't change it, you didn't change it, unless we both had invoked the protocol to change it and we both knew. So that's the easiest way I can explain it. It's like the permanent marker. It's like the Sharpie of the internet.
Oh,
and we needed that to handle. Right? We needed that to handle the trillions of dollars of obligations that we make to each other as legally separate entities.
Yeah.
Without that, we're screwed.
Here's the question I always run into. You described the internet as a fabric layer that came and was an important thing when it came, and now it's this thing we rely on to send information back and forth, but it's missing this one component, which is, yes, we can have distributed information across many computers. There's no centralized control over any of them, and there's so many benefits to that. But the layer it's missing is the security layer, the layer that says, for sure what you made and for sure what I received was not doctored in any way, was not hacked, was not tweaked, was not changed. You are who you say you are, and I am who I say I am. Those all are missing from the internet as it is today. Is blockchain or technologies based on blockchain or the work that you guys are doing, is the idea to basically plug a new component into the internet and say, here is the new way that we verify everything? Is that the idea?
Yeah, man, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about maturing the internet. That's what, I've been part of IBM off and on 2 or 3 times, always part of the team that was in the open source trying to mature the internet. I was in the internet division. I was in the Java division. I was in the XML division, all trying to, not simply make money on some kind of product, but on a much bigger thing, which is, I think we made a few pennies on the internet, but we didn't make any money helping build the internet. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's that again. We need to build this playing field and play soccer, and we just want to get done building the playing field. And I don't want a lot of fooling around, arguing about what the playing field should look like. I want to go out and play soccer. So that's and the thing about the transaction web, if you want to call it that, or the transaction fabric for the internet, is that before this notion of openly governed open source, you couldn't have the advent of a transaction fabric for the internet, because look, information is one thing, tweets are one thing, but grandma's pension or trillions of dollars in transactions, if IBM built that, nobody'd use it. If a government like DARPA set it up, nobody else other than the government would use it. It has to be built by all of us for all of us. Why we took our code and some other companies took their code, and at the earlier than I've ever seen, and I've been involved in open source 20 years, I've never seen a group of companies take the courageous act of saying, well, this could become a giant mess, but we're going to put it out in the open and work together collaboratively from almost day one. Ethereum doesn't look like that. Ethereum was, a few cats, smart guys, love those guys, very smart, but they control that code, and they have from day one. Bitcoin too. There's a small group of people. It's open source, but not governed open source, and it's a meritocracy. Any competitor to IBM could become more of a maintainer of that code base, more of a contributor than us. The government, there's already a huge number of Chinese developers. There's 5,000 developers working together out in the open. There's 120 companies in Hyperledger Foundation, and the lion's share of them are working on Fabric. And there's also some really cool other projects in there, like Sawtooth Lake Intel, which is really interesting when it comes to Internet of Things. And we actually think that Poet on Fabric is a really great way of, Fabric is very modular. So when we talk about Hyperledger Fabric as the transaction fabric for the internet, the modularity of it is why we think it's a good candidate for this, because you can plug Poet in there, or you can plug a Kafka algorithm in there, or Tendermint, or any other kind of, you could theoretically plug even a proof of work kind of algorithm in there. It's not something we're doing, it's not our interest, but you could. I bet a high school student could be right now writing the proof of work ordering component for Fabric. So it has this flexibility.
How would an average consumer out there see the effects of this once it starts getting going, once it starts adopted and more of these systems start using it?
Well, it's very viral, right? So we did this thing called a Connectathon with the early Fabric v.1 code base, which right now is open source. A skilled person could go and build it today and start using it, running it. By March 20th, it's going to be in production, and it'll be easy to use. A 2-year JavaScript programmer could write applications on the Fabric, and you just put up a peer, which is like think of a Fabric peer like an Apache web server for the transaction age, right? And then you connect to an ordering service, and you can connect to any kind of ordering service that's out there. You could set up one of your own. And we built one or two, but we focused mostly on the modularity. So we're expecting lots of other people to compete to say, oh, I'm the best ordering. So you can pay on all. And for different functions and different use cases, everybody's going to have. So great platforms and great. Fabric's not a platform; it's a fabric. It's below platforms. You build platforms and compete on top of it.
Yeah.
And great things like that, like the internet, provide lots of opportunity for competitors to create stuff on top. And so you could compete at the ordering service or consensus layer. And then you just start putting peers up, and then connecting more peers and more peers. And then you say, well, okay, that's great. So we're all doing, dispute resolution on this ledger. Let's do another channel where we can do dispute resolution, but on trade finance or on supply chain. I'm trading radishes and I want to give you a special price on my radishes, and I don't want the other guys that buy from me to have to, to know about that price. Well, I can create a special channel that's just between you and me, and then we can settle on a more public channel that's handling, say, that part of the supply chain. There's a good video on this. If you go to YouTube and you just type in Hyperledger Fabric V1,
okay,
you'll see a 2.5-minute video that gives you a pretty good use case on how that works.
So a quick question I had: if obviously the idea is that we get to a place where this is so broad based that even average users won't even really notice what's happening because it's just happening and everything's working. But who's the middleman that gets cut out with this? Do we see a huge shift in the industry when it comes to payment processors? Do all the middlemen that sort of handle all the stuff between banks, between consumers, between large retail entities like Walmart or Amazon or whoever, does all that middleman stuff just poof go away, and we're looking at a whole new industry for the middleware of the transaction because of this?
In some places it's possible, but I think that like banks, in 1993, banks were worried that the internet was going to disintermediate them. I think they did okay in that, right? I think that there's lots of creativity out there. It's not like Uber in the taxi industry. First of all, I think bankers are know a lot more about how not to get disrupted than a taxi fleet owner. So I think that it's not really it's how you respond to the technology. And I guess at this point in my career, I've been around enough that I've seen good responses and bad responses. And I think a good response is to say, hey, wait a minute, this transaction fabric for the internet makes it really easy for me now to build viral business networks. And I already have a whole bunch of IBM and IBM Global Finance. We have trading partners that help us with us. Fabric of the internet. And then we can start to virally scale that out into other functions just by adding a simple, what you might call a smart contract, we call an agreement, or a piece of chain code that we just throw on the ledger. I mean, effectively, smart contracts, agreements, chain code, they're all synonyms for stored procedure on the blockchain ledger, right? It's basically saying, I've got this logic that is invocable. I'm putting it in a stored procedure on a transaction entry and making it permanent so you can't change it. Right. So I can just add those, and I'm basically adding functionality, and then I can add more viral participants to that. I was in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, and somebody asked me, they were an Ethereum developer, and they said, well, why would I want to do Fabric, when I'm not mining? And I'm like, well, if you're not mining, you don't need to be compensated for mining, because you're not burning down an Ireland's worth of power every year trying to mine.
Right.
So now it's like a web server, and the question I have to ask you is, why do you have a web server, or why do you have a provider that gives you a web server, right?
Sure.
Why are you on the internet? Because you want to do something, right? So now it's really back to that same question. So I would say that these intermediaries can start to say, I can add a lot more value as the founder of a very cool, very massive business network, where I'm not decentralizing trust. That's sort of that's second wave. That's Bitcoin, Ethereum, that sort of thing, or first wave, second wave. I think this third wave that's about to just break on us. Like, I would be out there right now if I was writing code, if I wasn't helping write this code, doing what did you do in 1993 if you were smart? You were registering domain names, right? Yeah. And you were staking your claim to conceptual spaces. Well, that's going to happen again. You'll have IBM.chain, right? And you'll say, hey, I've got 4,000 companies that are part of my business network, and we're all distributing trust, not decentralizing trust. Decentralizing trust, sort of in blockchain world, implies trustlessness. And come on, I need to know who you are. If I don't know who you are, then yeah, man. I mean, if I don't know who you are, then it really is true that smart contract becomes, as final as a Supreme Court decision, because you don't know who you gave the money to, right?
Well, if you're using this for shipping, you really want to know who the people doing the shipping are, that it's coming from the right place, right? So
KYC, AML, all of this stuff, we think that's really important. But why? But Satoshi Nakamoto wasn't the end of history; it was the beginning of history. Right. So we said, hey, this is a pretty good idea, but we also need identity. And we need confidentiality. How do we get all of that stuff, inspiration that we got from these awesome things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, to teach us how to do something that works for industry and works at the internet level in a generalized way?
So I mentioned finance, I mentioned energy, I mentioned shipping. Are there any projects that you're aware of that either surprised you or you think people would find surprising that blockchain is being used in that way?
I think, I don't know. I think that I'm not surprised by any of this stuff right now. I think that, again, it's hard to predict. We will be surprised because you couldn't have predicted Uber in '93, right? I mean, you might have. Gates probably could have, but
I wish I could have.
I think he probably did in one of his books. Yeah, right. But you could sort of project some use cases. I think supply chain is going to be a huge use case area, so it's a killer domain, I think, for this. And then I think finance starts to follow on that. So, sort of learning about the blockchain, the finance industry was the vanguard of companies who wanted to learn about it. Now we're seeing supply chain, very practical use cases, especially around provenance, like Hyperledger, is a pretty cool company you should take a look at. Skew Chain and these, Gem and others. There's really great examples, Fluid, of companies using a variety of different methods. We think that ultimately they're all going to want to use Fabric when everything shakes out. To some folks right now, because they're loving their Ethereum or what have you. What I'm trying to suggest is that Fabric there is no question about a private or public network. With Fabric, you choose a channel, any channel, and so you can have a private transaction or a public transaction. You could have, while most of the things that we're doing as a company are probably going to be on, or what I'll call permissive networks or channels, you could theoretically have a permissionless, trustless channel.
Sure.
Just to make the point. I mean, I sometimes, not everybody, in a permission camp loves hearing that, but I think intellectually it's honest to say you could have different kinds of channels. To get a little wonky, you'd have to, for those who know about data structures here, you wouldn't have a channel that could allow forking and a channel that could at the same time allow non-forking protocols. So you'd have to say, well, I'm going to have a forking protocol with a proof of work system on this channel and a non-forking protocol and a PPFT or Kafka-based order on this channel. As you get to, it's horses for courses. You get to choose the right tool for the right job in your application.
There's so much to know about this. There's so much going on, and it's still, like as you mentioned, very early days. It's the 1993 of the internet for blockchain. You mentioned a good YouTube video. We'll note that as well. Anything else that you would recommend for people who want to learn more about this?
Well, I'll say only one last thing, in that we were saying in the beginning about permission networks. What I'll say is that identity is important, but the internet, just to make the point, is a permissioned system. It has ICANN at the top of it. I would call it a permissive system, right? And I think that's something to think about when Fabric starts to roll out V1 and people start putting peers up all over the world, which is already happening, and it goes viral. Then it's not about saying I'm using Fabric, therefore I'm on a permission network. That's not true. I'm on the Fabric, I'm on the internet, and I'm using a permissioned protocol for this particular channel, or I'm not. I'm using a permissionless protocol for this channel. So it's a network of networks, not a network.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the mental model that everybody's had up until now is, I have this network, a Bitcoin network, an Ethereum network
for this, and then there's another one for that. Yeah.
An enterprise Ethereum network, but that's not Fabric. Fabric is taking that to the next level.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, guys. Thanks.
If folks want to follow up on you particularly, where should they go? He already lost. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, because he's on Twitter. So go look up John Wolpert on Twitter. You can find him there. All right. Thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Let's get into some top stories, starting with Sony announcing an SD card with read speed of 300 megabytes per second and write speed of 299 megabytes per second in 32 to 128 gigs, coming sometime in March, but they won't tell us how much they are. Now here are some more top stories. Apple's going to open its new campus in Cupertino, California to be called Apple Park starting in April. About 12,000 employees are going to move in over the course of 6 months, and there will be a 1,000-seat auditorium that they have named Steve Jobs Theater. Scott?
Well, I was really hoping they'd go for Pen, Apple, Pineapple, Pen. But,
hopefully that will be a conference room name somewhere.
One would hope.
The Pen, Apple, Pineapple, Pen.
I love I love following Tim Cook right now, because he's, I don't know, letting a lot of stuff out on social media about how close we're getting, what Steve Jobs had in mind, what they're calling things. Like, to me, this is sort of exciting to see all that stuff finally happen and see this great earthbound spaceship come to life. So
finally land in Cupertino. Yeah.
Microsoft launched Skype Lite. Oh my goodness, another version of Skype, everybody. This is aimed at the Indian market, specifically in India. The new version of Skype is only 13 megabytes, so it's very small, and designed to work well on 2G connections. The app should be less battery or use less battery and have a mode that reduces data usage and video calls. It will also support Aadhaar, India's national identification verification system. And this is interesting because I would like a Skype Lite, to be honest. I feel like Skype's a little bloated. So maybe if this goes well, or maybe if it's regionalized, I can install Skype Lite. I understand why it's going to be useful where they're introducing it, but it seems like we're all looking for thinner clients for this sort of thing anyway, and I wouldn't mind something a little thinner than what we got.
Well, first of all, I believe in Skype Lite, and I believe in me. But also, as we see so many companies trying to figure out how to crack the Indian market, companies from outside India particularly, one of the things they're dealing with is low connectivity or lower speeds or high data costs. And so they are, as Skype's doing here, trying to come up with lightweight efforts to get people to adopt their system. Facebook famously ran afoul of the national sentiment by trying to do some zero rating, and that didn't work, but they have now come up with a Facebook Lite, lightweight version that seems to play that line better. So a Skype Lite is great too. And like you say, Scott, for those of us elsewhere who would just like more efficient software, this causes some nice benefits as well.
Yeah, half the calories, but still tastes great.
AMD announced 3 new Ryzen processors. This was their big announcement. The CEO, Lisa Su, has really been saying this is the make or break year for AMD. All 3 of the Ryzen processors announced use the Zen core. They have 8 cores, 16 megabytes of level 3 cache, and they're all unlocked for overclocking. Top of the line is the R7 1800X. That one has 3.6 gigahertz base speed. You can boost that up to 4 gigahertz, and it has 95 watts of TDP. It's $499. So it's about half the cost of the comparable Intel i7 6900K, which is $1,050. At least that's the one AMD is comparing it to. There's also the R7 1700X. That's 3.4 gigahertz for $399. The R7 1700 is 2.0 gigahertz for $329. And you can pre-order them today for shipping March 2nd. Now, comparing the 1800X, that's the top of the line new Ryzen, to Intel's i7 6900K, AMD says the 1800X scores 9% higher in the Cinebench R15 multi-threaded test and is about the same as the Intel in the single-threaded test. Now, Broadwell still has more instructions per clock, but AMD made what a lot of people thought was a laughable promise to get that instructions per clock number for AMD processors up 40% over the Excavator generation. They got it up 52%. So even though they're still a tiny bit behind Intel, that's a huge jump. AMD also showed Ryzen beating Intel in handbrake video encoding with better frame rates than Intel using Super Elite 4 at 4K. So these are compelling in that they are good performing chips, Scott, but they're also, especially at that top end, way more affordable.
Also, I cannot help but go back in my head to the heyday of the CPU wars between AMD and Intel. And it wasn't that long ago, but when AMD and Intel were really going at it, and AMD was getting some real ground, and this is, I think, even before their purchase of the video card division, they seemed to be really on a roll. I feel like part of that was there was a huge jump between generations back then. If you went from a Pentium 90 to a Pentium 100, it was a sizable, tangible, measurable difference in the kind of performance you could expect as an end user even. Nowadays, it's so weird. It's like it's not about the chip anymore. It is the chip. The chip matters, but we're at such a diminishing returns point that sometimes video card is what matters most. Sometimes it's hard drives and how quickly they're accessed and whether they're solid state or not that make the difference. Refresh rates on monitors play a difference. Like there's so many other factors, and I don't know if that war is, it feels like a Cold War kind of, like it's just sort of happening. It's not really affecting me, but it's happening. We know it's there. And I hope this is a sign that maybe we can see them get back into the competitive seat again, because it's been a long time, and that long time has made people kind of forget why it matters whether your CPU can keep up with the other CPU manufacturer or not. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people would say AMD let that war cool off. That's actually one of the reasons. And Lisa Su, CEO of AMD, is really, really trying to tout this as the heating up of it again.
Yeah. Well, they're trying hard with their Radeon series as well. Their video card business is once again going after NVIDIA's throat. So it does feel like it's all hands on deck at AMD right now. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably good. Verizon announced more cities will be in the test pattern for its pre-commercial 5G wireless service in the U.S. We talked about this last Wednesday. Or was it last Wednesday? Whenever it was, when we had Molly Wood on. Talked a bunch about what 5G is and how it works. By mid-year, customers in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Atlanta, Bernardsville, Brockton, Dallas, Denver, Houston, Miami, Sacramento, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. There's no Salt Lake on there. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, no LA either.
May be able to take part in the test. 5G has not been yet set as a standard, as we talked about last time this came up, and the hardware is certainly in its earliest stages. But I'm stoked for what from what we learned about what the standard is starting to shape up to be. I would really like to be a test city.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what they're looking for is business partners who are willing to invest in a little bit of hardware to test this out and see if it's useful. Maybe sign up a contract to get them on Verizon's version of 5G ahead of AT&T. That's what AT&T is doing as well. So this isn't so much for the average person like you and I to just go out and start getting 10 gigabit per second speeds on wireless. It'll be a long time before 5G is even capable of something close to that. But it is another one of those signposts along the road that Verizon is like, okay, we've got 11 markets where we can at least do some tests. We at least have some coverage that we can try. And this before the actual standard is even set. So it's them trying to make sure that they're ready as soon as possible to roll this out.
Sure. And I still have questions about, the hardware you have in your hand right now may not be able to take advantage of it at all. Or this is all early goings, folks. So don't get too excited, I guess.
Google announced it will discontinue Google Site Search. That's the search that you can pay for as a web publisher to apply Google Search just to your site. Google will stop selling new licenses April 1st. If your license expires before June 30th, they're going to give you a free 3-month extension. And then after June 30th, everybody whose license expires, the product stops working. So they won't cut you off. They'll wait until your current term ends. And if it's ending soon, they'll give you a little bit of an extension. But essentially, they're going to phase it out over the next year. Google will continue to provide its free ad-supported custom search engine that sites can transition to. If they don't want to transition to that, they just need to shut off Google Site Search and switch to something else. I think it's interesting that, Google is built on search, right? But this is very telling that Google is built on ads, because they're shutting off the one people pay for and saying, we'd like you to use the one that delivers more ads.
I will give you purely anecdotal evidence here. So take this for all the grain of salt that it's worth. But never had I ever come across a website where they had integrated Google Site Search and I wasn't disappointed by it. And I don't mean by the results. It worked fine. I always felt like that was some weird, cheapo, slapped-on, snap-in solution that made me think less of the site I was visiting. It felt cheap. And
it felt like they were putting Google in a frame sometimes. It really did.
Yes,
I know what you mean.
Yes. And then I was never quite sure. Was I searching Google? Was I searching just the site? Was I getting a combination of the two? Were the suggestions after the first search actually from Google, or was it from the site? Like it was never very clear. And because Google never went the extra mile to say, let's integrate everyone's CSS and let's get style sheets functioning together so it looks like we've never left your site. Instead, it always just felt kludgy. So that is purely a side.
It's a personal impression, but I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it always bugged me. So I'm actually not surprised that this is finally getting taken away. But again, I have that bias. So, who knows?
Well, it's not going away. You're just if you're going to see it, it's also going to have Google AdWords on it.
Right. It'll look even more like Google at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
At Ignite Australia, Microsoft announced a second major update to Windows 10, which will come later in 2017. It looked like it would come to insiders in April or May and be released to the public around November. The creators update has not been scheduled, but is expected in April. That's the one I'm very excited and curious about. More details are likely at the Microsoft Build Conference, which happens in May. I was looking just today at some alternative brands for digitizing tablets, sort of Wacom level art tablets, just to see what the world's doing now. Ever since they announced their Creative Studio all-in-one PC thing, and I played with that a bit, found it a little laggy. So now we heard at CES that who's doing it? I forgot. Oh, Dell has a new one called Canvas. That looks really awesome, nice, big, and affordable digitizing tablet for artists and for professionals. And so what I didn't realize that there are about 24 Chinese manufacturers who are making pretty good stuff, selling it on Amazon for, in some cases, a fourth of the price of any of these. All of that aside, they're all going to be able to take advantage of the Windows Creative Update. So I've buried the lead a little here, but I really am excited for what that may bring to Windows. It is really kind of a weird Macifying of Windows that we haven't seen in a very long time. And I only mean that from the perspective of somebody who has been using these tools for so long for creative work and seen the pendulum shift between Microsoft and Apple as to who is most interested in my money. And right now, Microsoft just seems to be way more interested in it than Apple is on their platform. So,
I don't think that's true. Apple's very interested in your money.
Oh, they want my money,
yeah.
But they're not talking to me the way they used to. They used to make amazing apps that were like top of the line, industry standard stuff, and now they've just let Adobe do that, and others do that. They let Autodesk come in and just do that. So they're no longer being the flagship of things like video editing and stuff like that. They've let others come in and do that, and
okay, but to play devil's advocate, Microsoft's not making editing software. They're not making Photoshop. It's kind of the same thing.
Well, so here's my point. You're totally right, but here's where it all boils down to me. I've got to have a platform to create on, and up till now, Apple has been, for the most part, the platform with the most creatives using it. Therefore, the community had the most outreach in a Mac sort of platform way, and I'm not sure that that's so true anymore. And when the company who makes Windows shifts gears and says, we think creatives are important, therefore we're going to have an entire update dedicated to a lot of these features. We're making a computer and portables, for that matter, with the Surfaces that are going to help those people and those careers along. Like, they seem to be making efforts in that direction, whereas Apple has lately been making directions out the other way. And you could say, well, what about the iPad Pro, which I love, and the Pencil, it's great, it's awesome. That's maybe one exception. For the most part, it's been phones, and the Mac stuff has just gotten further and further away from creative. So it's hard for me to even say these things. I used to be just so devoted in that regard, but I'm really starting to feel the shift from Microsoft, and I think it's good. It's going to be good for Apple too, because I think that they're at some point going to have to respond to this if it makes some sizable difference, to the bottom line. I don't know if there's enough of us out there to do that anymore, but
well, I mean, you could disagree with Scott, but what he's saying is this is the message I'm getting, and he is not alone. He is not the only one saying that. On the other hand, whether Microsoft can actually deliver on the promises it makes is going to be put to the test, probably when this thing comes out, which we expect in April on the Creators Update. So it is an interesting time because more people, whatever you think is best right now, more people are open to the idea of switching platforms in the creative side. And I think that's the most important thing about what you're saying right now. And Windows 10 is also switching, and this is why this was released in Australia, to a different cadence. So again, instead of wondering, when you're going to get a security patch and then when you're going to have to drop a bunch of money on Windows, you're going to just keep getting two updates a year, it sounds like, because the slide they put out at Ignite in Australia shows Windows 10 in July 2015, the update in November 2015, then the anniversary update last August, now this Creators Update coming up in the spring, and the big news, the second update coming by the end of 2017. So they're trying to say you will always have the best Windows if you get Windows now.
Yeah, and they're saying to me, I mean specifically to me and creatives like me, they're saying, you draw a lot, you create a lot, do you animate, do you do these things? We know that that's still a thing in this ever emerging mobile world. We know you still need a platform to create and build. And so we want to build tools that do that. That's a message that I'm getting loud and clear. Now whether it's lip service and come this update, we're like, bam, just kind of fizzles. I'm not that impressed with the Surface Studio that I played with at the mall kiosk. It's a little laggy and some other issues, but all that aside, if it's more than just lip service and they can actually, really do this for my specific market, that is a huge hand across the aisle. So I'm just saying, I don't know what it means.
And honestly, folks, if you're out there saying like, hey, stop picking on my favorite company, Apple/Microsoft, this is good for us. You want them to be going at each other because it means, like Scott said earlier, better products.
Absolutely. So let's see how it all turns out. I'm very excited to see how it pans out.
To get all the tech headlines each day in less than 10 minutes, you can subscribe to our sister show, dailytechheadlines.com. Got a couple emails before we are out of here. Emails, not emoles. Emoles are virtual moles that are good for your virtual lawn. That's not what we have for you. Instead, we've got emails. And Scott, would you do me the honor of reading the first one?
I surely will. I live in Britain, and your conversation about WhatsApp left me scratching my head. Both Tom and Rich from lovely Cleveland talked about never using WhatsApp, and Tom said something about using text messaging instead. Over here in the UK, the only person I know who doesn't use WhatsApp is American. Everyone else I know uses it all the time. I know there are national/regional divides with apps like Line, for example. But is it the same with WhatsApp? And is Tom unusual for using text messages, or is that something a large number of Americans still use? There's not a name here, but this person in Britain makes a really good point. I started using WhatsApp because Terpster and I needed to keep communicating in a relatively free way, and he had switched to a Google Pixel phone, and because of that, Mark Terpster and I couldn't talk for free anymore over iMessage. So he says, well, I'm using WhatsApp. I said, oh, well, I should probably finally use that. And it's fine. It does totally exactly what it's supposed to do. But I do think it's a lot more texting in America than perhaps other parts of the world. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I was just trying to find the name. It's David. Sorry about leaving your name off of there, David. David wrote that. We got a response because this was posted on our blog from Stim, who said, there may be some differences by age, but I'm around Tom's age and I work in IT at a university, so I see a cross-section. It seems to me like texting is more common in the US because everyone has it. With the variety of smartphone platforms and some older or tech-phobic parts of the population still on dumb phones, there's nothing quite as universal as texting. And most plans here now allow for unlimited texting, or at least it's much cheaper than data plans can be in many cases. The students I interact with seem to split time between texting, Snapchat, and Facebook Messenger, somewhat dependent on the student, their phone, and their data plan. And that pretty much sums up what I would have said in response, is that I don't think I'm alone here in the US, but I also think there's an age-related or at least community-related aspect to it. So if you are old and used to unlimited text messaging plans like me, you use text messaging because you know everybody here has it in the US. But if you're trying to go overseas, where the text messaging plans might not be unlimited or might not be compatible or free, then you go to something else. And I've used Twitter direct message for similar reasons. I've used WhatsApp for similar reasons. So yeah, I think it's particular to the US, and it may even be a slice of the demographic of the US too.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It's funny. I find myself using Twitter DMs a lot more than I thought I was going to. Turns out there's a lot of people I work with that are on Twitter and they're checking those. So it turns out to be a pretty good messaging service. Slack messaging gets used a ton now by me, maybe more than anything I use. But even you and I, 1 minute it might be text, the next minute it might Slack. It might even be a Twitter DM here and there, a Skype message, whatever, like emails. It's still kind of across the board. And at some point that consolidation is going to probably have to happen for me. But right now I'm still sort of out there.
Finally, Danielle Macias Galindo wrote, in today's episode, Tom made an interesting comment about making a single processing service that can eventually use different platforms like Amazon Voice Service, Siri, Facebook, and so on. I am currently working with this and proposing a similar approach at work. Previously, if you wanted to develop an Android or an iOS app or even a Windows Phone app, you needed a dev team for each platform. With chatbots and personal assistants, development is considerably reduced as you are most of the time dedicated towards implementing a single API and then formatting input and output for all the conversational interfaces you service. However, voice offers more challenges with respect to typing, as users tend to be less forgiving when making a query by voice and not getting the expected results, probably because they must make the same query many times. Just to add to the conversation, I think Amazon is moving away from only AVS with their new service called Lex. Also, Microsoft is getting into the competition with Luis, called the Language Understanding Intelligence Service. These platforms, along with API.ai, which was acquired by Google last September, offer intuitive environments to develop conversational assistants for different virtual assistants. In some cases, machine learning is offered as part of the package, so the system can recognize utterances that were formulated differently, and it'll be interesting to see both industry and end user communities embracing that technology. Cool. So yeah, we may get to that point where the developers just create their API. It plugs into all the different services. We just talk to whatever device we're talking to, and we get to them on the other end.
Kind of into that idea. I like this. Yep. In fact, it's reminding me of the blockchain conversation of another open standard, basically, that everywhere in all places at once for everybody who needs it. I like it.
Big thanks again to John Wolpert of IBM, the Blockchain Offerings Director, for talking with us today. And we'll have links to a lot of the stuff that we talked about with him in our show notes at dailytechnewsshow.com. And thanks to you, Scott Johnson. What's going on in your world?
Oh, there's always so many dumb things going on in my life. But if you want to follow, I never talk about the webcomic on here, so I'll do it here. I always have some interesting ideas to talk about through visual mediums. And if you want to see what I'm drawing on iPad Pros or Wacom tablets or wherever I might be drawing it, even sometimes a piece of paper, you can check out my comic. It's now nearly 15 years old, and it's myextralife.com. Do check it out if you get a second.
Thanks to everyone who supports the show, including Jarrett Gibbs, Dennis Thomas, and David Lovelace. And big thanks to Stone Harriman and Ron Ryman, who just raised their pledges at patreon.com/DTNS. We could not do it without you. Keep the support coming. We love it, and we love giving you extra stuff there. So check it out, patreon.com/DTNS. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. And, of course, our website is dailytechnewsshow.com. Back tomorrow with Justin Robert Young. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Boom! That's a show.
Shaka-laka-laka.
What should we call it?
I was actually looking at one of those off-brand Chinese tablets on Amazon, the Huion.
Yeah.
One.
You were looking at
I heard some
off-brand
pretty
tablets?
good things. I think the what?
You were looking at what?
Off-brand drawing tablets.
Oh, okay.
That.
The one I was looking at today was the monoprice one, which I didn't know more.
Don't go with the monoprice one. I've heard mixed reviews on the reliability.
It's so cheap.
Definitely check out the Amazon one. Sorry, everyone. Because I mean, the only thing that I found really sticking out is that most of the Chinese ones require batteries in the pen, whereas the Wacom uses induction to power the pen. But other than that, a lot of people like them.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know what their professional state in
that's the thing I'm trying to find out from some of the reviews and stuff, because I'd be happy to even test one, but I don't know which one to go for. Been thinking a lot about that.
Check YouTube. There was a couple of British artists who tested some of them out, but that was like 4 years ago, so I don't know if it's still applicable. Top is blockchain in a nutshell.
Top of our titles, you mean?
Top of our titles. Top of the titles, like top of the pops.
Yeah.
This will go down on your permanent blockchain.
That's my favorite right at the moment.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Nothing is written in blockchain. Nobody puts Google in a frame. Alice in /blockchains. Baking Tom's blockchain onion.
This will really bake your onion is now one of my new favorite phrases, by the way.
But what does that mean?
Does it matter?
Yes.
Nah.
It's like saying an elephant can ride a unicycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also love that one.
Put the block on the chain wax. That's a reference to Key and Peele skit.
Nice.
Tackling blocks and chains. The sound of the EWF working on the blockchain. Apple Park, PARC.
Flight Research Park.
Yeah.
Clever.
John Wolpert, Internet Blockchain Man.
Okay. It's a superpower.
Chains. Alice in Blockchains. Half the calories still taste great. I don't remember that one. Maybe I'm missing it.
Oh, I don't remember that one. One of the title suggestions, or?
Oh no, I don't remember that one. I don't know the reference to half the calories still taste great.
Skype Lite.
Oh, okay.
Because I made a Crystal Light reference.
Oh, all I remember from Crystal Light is the dance aerobics things that show up on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
I like this will go down on your permanent
blockchain. Yeah.
Can you imagine if that is if you're a religious person, you there is a cosmic scoreboard of one variety or another that keeps a list of all the crap you've done and all the good stuff you've done through your life. I mean, this could be essentially like a non-bureaucratic version of that for your financial dealings.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new story is that when you get to the pearly gates, they look at your blockchain.
Yeah.
And evaluate your life.
What were the two ghosts in the Christmas Carol? The first one. No,
There's three.
No,
The
not
ghost
three.
of Christmas past, present, and future.
No, the Morley.
Oh, Marley.
Marley.
Yeah.
He was wrapped up in chains of his own.
He was
making.
wrapped up in blockchain. See, we're already modernizing a Christmas Carol.
Perfect.
All right, I'm exporting now. Pretty sure I'm going to go with this will go on your permanent blockchain.
I like that one a lot.
Let's see if I can find one of those reviews for you, Scott.
Is it Huion is the brand?
Yeah, Huion.
Yeah, I've been looking at them too. The problem is they don't have anything bigger than a 19-inch. I want something like 22.
Oh, you want to? Yeah, I haven't seen. Big. Jazza, 3 months. Oh, he's the official video sponsor of Huion.
Oh, really?
How big is this thing?
What I'm looking at is the GT185. That one is.
The sounds of two men shopping for tablets.
I mean,
How big is this thing? Oh,
they're
wait.
a fraction of the price of like equivalent Wacons, but they also might be a fraction of the quality. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the. Ooh, I don't know. Here, I'll send you something. I've never seen this before. This could be what your.
Yeah, just throw it in Slack.
Here's the video spokesperson. You know, I wish they would do. The G.
You wish they would do what?
Oh, I wish they would do for tech like they do for as seen on TV products, where you just kind of have a really slick sales pitch guy. Like, oh, you need this. Google Chrome, that's the past.
That's for grandmas.
You want the Billy Mays of tech?
Yeah, that would be great. Billy Mays. I used to think he was someone important outside of that. Like Billy Mays.
He was.
It's like, oh, was
Awesome.
he?
He was important in getting you deals.
That's
No,
right.
but I thought he was like. So this is my thing. My
Like
whole thing
you
was-
should have known him from something else. Yeah.
Exactly. I thought maybe he might have been a.
That's the
An
power of
athlete.
suggestion, right? They just
An
made
athlete.
it seem like he was so important.
But
Of
Billy
course, you all know
Mays-
Billy Mays.
Billy Mays sounds like an athlete. Like I used to play. What's
Willie
the
Mays.
Like Willie Mays.
George
Yeah,
Foreman.
it's
George Foreman.
another name for Willie Mays.
Oh,
'cause
George
it's Billy.
Foreman, right? Yeah,
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like you knock out the fat.
I could see that.
What did Billy Mays do before
Billy Mays here.
he was a spokesperson? He was rocking the beard before the beard was cool too.
Oh yeah, that beard is still on the hunt, man. That thing's everywhere.
He was born in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, raised in Pittsburgh. He was a walk-on linebacker on the West Virginia University football team.
Oh, that's right.
That's totally where you know. Worked for his father's hazardous waste company before moving to Atlantic City in 1983, where he sold the Washmatic portable washing device to passersby, along with other as seen on TV products.
Washmatic. I love that. The way you could just put Matic on anything.
In Atlantic City, he was taught by older salesmen to pitch. Then he started traveling to home shows, auto shows, state fairs. At the Pittsburgh Home Show in '93, he struck up a friendship with rival salesman Max Apple, founder of Orange Glow.
Wow.
And then began promoting OxyClean, Orange Glow, and Kaboom on the Home Shopping Network.
You know what? That sounds like a perfect treatment for
It's a
TV
perfect
show.
American story.
This guy wasn't too happy with the this tablet or the screen tablet after 3 weeks. It's like my simple review. I'm really disappointed. So,
Huh.
it's
Yeah. His
you know
simple-
that's part of the thing is it's so seductive. It's like, whoa, it's so cheap. How could they do it? And now you figure why. They did it by by eliminating the magic.
It can't be possible. Can
But it is. It's like a pocket fisherman. I used to think about that. It's like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But then I was thinking, like, exactly how strong would that be? And it's not like you're going to be doing anything larger than like a trout at most.
It's not a small man.
A trout is not a small man.
No, the pocket fisherman.
Yeah, haven't you seen that?
I have.
From Ronco.
I own one of those. I had 2 of them. My brother and I had them.
Did you get any fish, or was it just a gift?
No, it worked. We caught
Oh,
fish
yeah?
in Lake Powell, yeah.
Nice.
I mean, I don't know if it was great for 2 kids.
But for a kid, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we were like 8 or 9. It was great.
Yeah, we got fish.
Mm-hmm. Catch bass off that back of the boat.
You go to the grocery store and they just jump right out of the refrigerator.
We bought a fish one time for the supermarket, not from from a Chinese supermarket, before there were chain Chinese supermarkets like Ranch 99. And we brought it home. We took it out and started flopping around, like flop, 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 flop.
That's fresh.
It's fresh. That fish enjoyed a good, warm, bubbly bath filled with scallions and assorted vegetables.
Mm. It seems all right.
Red Frog Pants, paste bin.
I am uploading. Mo, I'm glad you got my emo joke. I'm glad someone did. I appreciate that.
It's gotta get a little bit lower, yeah.
Joke may be a strong word for it.
Good recovery.
Thank you. Oh, goodness. It seems like the upload is the longest part of the day.
Is it? That's how I feel. I get the show done like this morning, and it's just,
Yeah.
oh, there's this part.
A watched upload never loads.
Nope. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I know we had a shorter pre-show today because we were trying to get everything ready for Mr. Wolpert, but I think it paid off. Thanks again to him for joining us, and we will see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.